Hi everybody, and welcome to, this is our last craft for Samhain and for Halloween. I hope you've been enjoying these little mini bonus crafting sessions. I love making special things at the holidays. And why not? You know, why not work with crystals and our oils and our herbs to work some magic? This is the most magical season of the whole year. So today's craft that we're making is the ancestral picture frame. And so with your kit, you got your basic frame, your chip stones. I don't know if we sent you the glue or if you had to BYO glue. I don't remember. But you need glue, and E6000 is the best for a project like this. You got some beautiful pieces of sari ribbon. And so sky's the limit. What I'm going to recommend that you do is open on the back of your frame when we're done. I don't want to use my fingernails for this, so I'm kind of seeing if I have another little tool here on my altar that I can use. You're going to kind of open the little hook piece. As it comes, it's kind of tight against there, so I just pulled it out a little bit. And then what I'm going to recommend that you do is take your sari ribbon. I think you'll probably be able to fit 2 pieces back there, 1 to 2 pieces, in the colors that you like best, that coordinate with your frame. And then run the sari ribbon through the hook on the back. I'll show you after I do it. I'll show you. This is just a more creative way to hang. It's a little more embellished, which I like, than just putting a nail in the wall. I like to do things a little fancier than that. So you put your sari fabric through the back, and then what I like to do is tie a bow, just a little one. And you'll want to tie a knot and then tie a bow on top of your knot. Let me do that. And then your bow on top. And so it will hang like this, right, on your wall, rather than hanging from the back of the hook. So that's up to you if you want to do that extra little step, but it definitely on your wall, it looks very pretty, because then your ribbons, if you do a nicer bow than I did, your ribbons can hang down over the front, and it's just more decorative. So that's just a little extra tip for you, and that's why the ribbons are there. Now, you had your choice, right, of which energy stream you want to call in from your ancestral line, whether it's strength or confidence or compassion. And so you got the chip stones that aligned to your intention. And mine is a combination, really, of one of the stones, 2 of the stones of strength. I'm going to be putting Tiger's Eye and garnet on mine, and then 2 of the stones of confidence, 3 of the stones of confidence. I'm going to be putting sunstone, yellow jasper, and rutilated quartz. I did not choose the stones of compassion, not because they're not important, but just because that's not the ancestral work that I'm doing right now. I have benefited from my ancestors' compassion for a long time, but in my ancestors' compassion, there's also been a lot of dysfunction, you know, that line between taking care of people and micromanaging them. So I've had to do a lot of ancestral healing around that. I'm kind of over that for this year. And so what I'm really working with, and the timing is good. I mean, coming out of Ayahuasca Journey, this is one of the themes of, like, what kind of leadership is in my ancestral line, and how can I work with those energies more consciously to be tapping into the flow that's already there? Remember that, and this is really key. In fact, I had someone ask me this week, you know, so when you go into Ayahuasca Journey, what if you've dealt with all your shit? Is there just nothing? And I looked at the person and laughed, because the answer is, you're never just dealing with your shit. You're dealing with, roughly, most shamans say, 7 years back, so 7 generations back, and 7 generations forward. The stuff your grandchildren and your grandnieces and grandnephews and all of them, the stuff that they are doing and going to do, is already impacting you in the present moment. You're responsible not just for the past of your magic, but for the future of your magic. And not having children doesn't get you out of that shit. Because there's still, you're an ancestor to someone. Your line continues in some way, and so just being mindful of that is really important, I think. So I have one here just to show you kind of an example of what you can do. I'm going to do mine a little differently, which is why I think it's good to show you too. You can completely fill in all around. And by the way, feel free to add, excuse me, excuse me, bless me. You can feel free to add other crystals from your collection too. So maybe you've got something else that wants to be in there. It's really beautiful to add dried flowers or dried leaves or dried petals too. So sky's kind of the limit. We just got you started. So what I'm going to do, because the ancestral energy is in a line, I'm actually going to weave a line of crystals all the way around the frame. And these are my favorite ancestors. I have a lot of ancestors. That is my grandmother, Pearl Roselle. And so she is the name that reason my daughter is Zoe Rose, because I took Rose from Roselle, and they are peas in a pod. That's my mother's mother. And then this is my father's mother. Her name was Fotini. They called her Fofi. Fotini is the light of God. It's kind of cool through the screen to see my face next to hers. Mwah! Love you, Fofi. So I'm very blessed to have a strong female line that I'm really proud of. And those ladies are both magicians. Fotini was a medicine woman in Crete. Her mother was as well. And people traveled by boat for days and weeks to get to her. And my dad remembers growing up and watching her make salves and butters and, you know, steeping her herbs and making her teas, and then her patients would come and do the thing. And when I first started making perfume, my dad cried and said, you know, it's like watching my mother. I used to watch her take rose petals and simmer them in, you know, olive oil just to like warm the oil out of the petals and then make like infused perfumes, because I mean it was wartime, they couldn't afford anything, but she still was crafty and creative. And then my mom's mother, minister, very powerful with the Holy Spirit, very creative. I mean, could make anything, everything from clothing to she did floral arranging. Just incredibly gifted, magical, spiritual, faithful women, and that's where I come from, and I credit them with everything I have today. I feel like the one thing I've done right in my life is that I have honored their gifts and really tried to bring them forward in a good way that I think they would be proud of. And I think all the time when I make big decisions, I'm always like, would you guys be proud of that? You know, would you feel good about that being the way your magic manifests in the world? And I feel so much support from them for Sage Goddess, you know what I mean? And I have seen them in Elder Council, I've seen them in Shamanic Journey, and so love my grandmothers. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a line. And as with every craft, you want to set an intention for what this frame represents. Remember that when you put pictures of your loved ones in frames and you set them out on your altar, they know that. They do. And they appreciate it, and they come around more, you know, because they feel invited, they feel welcomed into your space. It's really a beautiful practice, and you don't just have to do it this time of year. My grandmother's pictures sit on our main altar here at SG all year long, because without them, none of this, right? I mean, when people say, oh, thank you to me, I'm always like, thank you back to them, right? Because without them, I wouldn't be here and we wouldn't have this. So they are the stars of the show here. I just stand on their shoulders. So I'm going to set the intention that as I'm going to upgrade Grandma Pearl's picture, because Grandma Fofi has a nicer frame. So Grandma Pearl, this one is going to be for you. And I just want you to know that I love you. I love you both. I'm so grateful to you. And so as I put your energy into this frame, I just want you to know it's because I want you to be with me. And I appreciate your presence, and I feel you around me all the time. So may this be a reminder to me and to all who see it that magic is real, that it runs in the line, and may it be a symbol to her and to them that I continue to welcome their presence in my life on every level. Aho. And on we go. I stand on big shoulders. Okay, so I'm going to start in the top left and work clockwise. That's just a good way to do magical work. You're still opening a container of energy. And I'm going to start putting some of the chipstones down. And as you make this, what I would love to see you do is focus your energy on the sweetest of memories of the beloved whose picture will go in this frame. What is the sweetest of memories that you have? And so I'll just share a few with you as I go through this process, and then I'll lift up my frame and show you how my line is coming along. So this is my maternal line, and I have a lot of sweet memories. My grandmother was very active in my life when I was young, and I never met either of my grandfathers, and I never met Fofi. My grandmother was my only grand parental figure. And so she was it for me as far as what I knew of my line or my ancestors. And when she passed away in 1999, I was very lucky. You know, I was 26 at the time. So I'd had her for most of my life and my development. I got to have some of the big conversations that women need to have with the women in their line. I got to have those conversations and ask her a lot of the questions. There's still things, of course, to this day that I think, oh, now I wish I had you. Now I wish I could talk to you. But she prepared me well for magical work. She's the one who taught me. And I didn't realize I would need to use it until long after she was gone. But she was the one who taught me of the power of the name of Jesus Christ, actually. And that when you're afraid, you can invoke the name and it clears energy instantly. Evil can't sustain itself in the name of Jesus Christ. It can't really sustain itself in the name of any of the God avatars. So I'm pretty sure you could say the name of Buddha, you could say the name of Allah, you could say any of the holy names and probably banish evil with the same technique. But I certainly had the experience of doing that with the name of Christ. And she taught me that when I was very young, and I ended up putting that into practice much later in life. So her wisdom has sort of continued to carry me. So here's what I'm doing. So I'm making, and I'll, you can pull your glue off later and make it pretty. I try to put all my stones down first and then worry about making it attractive later. And just sort of follow the line over as you go. And so I'm deliberately sort of weaving a river of these stones to represent the river of life. So again, not feeling like I need to fill in every single gap in space, but really just creating a flow of energy that feels intuitive and accurate. So one of my favorite memories of my grandmother was revolved around sugar. My grandmother had no self-control when it came to sugar. And my mom tried not to have us eat a lot of sugar. We weren't a very healthy household. Like, we ate a lot of junk food and takeout food and stuff because money was always tight and time was always tight. There were 3 kids growing up, and my mom, everything was always a little overwhelming in my household. So here's more of that. And so Grandma expressed love a lot of times through sugar. I remember she would invite us over to her house, and I was the oldest granddaughter. I have a younger sister who's 5 years younger than I am. But she had a special tea set that was just for me that I could use when I went to her house. And she would fill the bottom of the teacup with sugar, like, pure cane sugar. And then she would pour the tea over it, but she wouldn't stir it. I would say, Grandma, don't stir it. And she would say, I'm not going to stir it, Athena. And she would let me scoop the tea. It would make like a sugar syrup in the bottom of my teacup, and I was just obsessed with that. I thought that was the coolest thing, that she didn't stir my tea so that I could eat the sugar out of the bottom. And she had an obsession with frozen cakes. To this day, I still can't eat a frozen cake. But Pepperidge Farm used to make this coconut frozen cake back in the day. I don't know if they still do. I've never looked for it, so I don't know. But my grandma was diabetic, and so she really wasn't supposed to be having that. But you better believe she sure did have that. And so I always had a piece of frozen cake when I was at her house, and she would have pies in there. I mean, I would open that refrigerator. She lived in a mobile home in Garden Grove, which is near Hawaiian Gardens in South Orange County. And so I would come to her mobile home, so excited to see her, and we would have frozen cake and super sugary tea, and that was our time together. And she was always like, anything I wanted to do, the answer was yes. She was extremely religious, but also extremely mischievous. She liked to get into a little bit of trouble. She and my mom are both Aquarius, but their moon and rising influences have to be very different, because my mom takes it to a real serious place, and my grandma was like, fuck that. If you could meet her, you'd probably see a lot in me that would remind you of her, because she was all at once naughty, but extremely grounded in her faith. And so she could have a very serious spiritual conversation with you that would give you goosebumps all over, and then in the same breath make a kind of a dirty joke and then say, hey, would you like some cake? I mean, it was sort of like she was all those things. And I try to pride myself on not being an uppity spiritual person. You know, I try not to take it too seriously. And because I think you still have to be human, you still have to laugh, you still have to get through the shit of it. And my grandma was very practical. Absolutely believed that her God was taking care of her in every moment. And I have to say, God did always provide for my grandmother in a powerful way. She's part of the reason I have the faith I do, because I saw how she was, you know, taken from having nothing, basically, and found a way to raise her children and even take care of, you know, my mom was 17 when my brother was born. And so there she was, starting to take care of a baby again when her youngest became a mom accidentally, right? And so, and to this day, my mom and my brother have such a beautiful relationship, and I think it's partly because my grandma really helped them. They lived with her, you know, she and my mom were both waitresses at the restaurant called House of Raymond, where my mom met my dad, who came to this country and started to work as a busboy. And ultimately, my dad was able to buy the House of Raymond from the owner. He basically gave the restaurant to my father when he wanted to retire, and took a little bit out of every paycheck until my dad and my uncle had paid for it. And so it's an amazing thing that my whole family, my grandmother had been a waitress there, my mother had been a waitress there, my dad and my uncle were both busboys, and then I grew up being a hostess there and helping seat customers. When I was a little bit younger than Zoe's age, I was already working there, mostly just to go and hang out with my dad, because he worked 7 days a week and couldn't take time off to spend with me, so my mom would take us down there so that we could spend time with him. And then when I was 17, that restaurant burned down. We got a call in the middle of the night that it was on fire. And by the time we got there, about half an hour later, it was gone. And there was nothing left. And so with it, that fire took memories, it took, and not just for my dad, but for my mom and for my grandma. I mean, it was, all of us had so much energy invested in that restaurant, not to mention that none of my relatives went to college, nobody had an education, there was no plan B, and so it very much shifted my consciousness to, I better go get an education and a job that doesn't rely on a business, right? Ironically. So I became a professor, which seemed really safe and secure, because you can always find a job as a professor, and so that made my parents feel a lot better. But anyway, so kind of a long story as I'm weaving this line of leadership. And again, it'll get prettier once I pull all the extra glue off. I just don't like to mess with that until it's done. So I'm weaving my line right now with you, both in sort of story form and in and in stone form. And so that wasn't the only time my grandmother has kind of saved the day, or saved the day for my family. When I was 6, my aunt died of cirrhosis of the liver. She had 5 children under the age of 10 when she died, my cousins. And when she passed away, my grandmother moved in to the house to take care of the kids, because my uncle couldn't do it by himself. He was running restaurants, and so she started to take care of them, and she started to cook for them, and they took all of her recipes basically and put them into the restaurant at the time, and the restaurant became very successful using my grandmother's recipes. That chain of restaurants was called Spires. So my family's restaurant was called House of Raymond, but the broader chain that my family has owned for many, many years is called Spires. There's 3 of them in Torrance. Anyway, and so to this day, my grandmother's recipes are all of the recipes at that restaurant. They've never changed the menu since that time. And so when you go on Mondays and have potato leek soup, that's my grandma's recipe. The gumbo, the vegetable beef soup that's there every day is her recipe. The biscuits are her recipe. The rice pudding is her recipe. It's actually a pretty cool thing that it's all family. And to this day, right, because, you know, that was 1980 when that all happened, and here we are, right, however many years later. The long and winding road of our path, right? And so I'm going to bring it down here to the corner, and I'm going to put, I put garnet there because my line and my grandmother grounds me. And she always has. She's always been this figure of grounding and stability and alignment and deeper truth. And then I moved into Tiger's Eye because her intuition was so right. She could call things, and it never ceased to amaze me how accurate her intuition was. And then I moved into Yellow Jasper because she was a big teacher to me around not trying to please all the people all the time, which is the medicine of Yellow Jasper, because you can't please all the people all the time. And you'll just end up frustrating yourself, right? And so it's not a good thing to even try to please all the people all the time. You're just gonna wear out your psychic resources, and then there'll be nothing left for you. So I'm just filling in any little gaps or bits, like where there's a little bit extra glue. I'm going in and just reinforcing around that I have a little extra space. My garnets had some like tinier pieces in it, and that seems kind of good for pushing into some of these tinier spots. And so, you know, I hope that you're inspired to do the same thing I'm doing, which is tell the stories, even if you're just telling them to yourself. That's okay. Or share the stories in our group. I know I would love to hear your stories. And mine, I feel like mine isn't even that special. It's not like I don't come from people that different than you come from, right? The only really unique part of my family history is one that we can't prove. It's very hard to parse out what happened, but my grandmother on my father's side, her maiden name was Moldavivakis, which means the royal family of Moldavia, or the House of Moldavia. And they fled Moldavia during the war. And there was a story passed down that they were actually the royal family, that there was some royal lineage there, and that no one ever talked about it because they would have been killed. And this didn't really come to light until after my grandmother passed, which is, it's been decades now. And you know, when I used to talk about this with my aunt, who was kind of the family historian, she poo-pooed it a little bit, like, you know, your grandma, and there was a little bit of dementia happening, and so people kind of wrote her off. It's really sad, actually, because I hope, you know, what a terrible thing to happen. You have someone, my grandmother was very smart. My dad's mother was very smart. But, you know, if you start to have a little bit of dementia, people all of a sudden start invalidating your contributions. That's kind of what happened with her. But anyway, if the story is true, she was a princess, and they fled because if they didn't flee, they were going to be killed. And it's always been this story. My dad said, you know, I don't know whether the stories are true or not, but what I can tell you is she always had a royal sensibility about her. Like, my grandmother carried herself really differently. She had a kind of a queenly aura to her. I mean, people were in awe of her a little bit, my dad's mother. And it's funny because even though I didn't have a chance to meet her for a number of different reasons, we were supposed to go and then we didn't, and then she was supposed to come but she was too ill, and she kept a picture of me by her bed until she died. So I know she thought of me. I know she was proud of me. I hadn't accomplished many of my dreams by the time she passed away, but I believe she's there, and she's the one who comes first in Elder Council. It's always Fofi. But she would recognize the work that I do, so it doesn't surprise me. Do you know what I mean? This is her mother's work. This is her work. This is This is, I'm not inventing. I'm stepping in. Do you know? I'm anchoring the line, but I'm not the creator of the line. So I'm in awe of it too, whether it's just the fact that we are magicians, which we can prove. There's a lot of stories and recipes and things that that do show that they were incredibly powerful medicine women, or rather whether they were the royal family. And it was too unsafe to share that. You know, it's still an interesting set of stories to tell. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with this. So this is the line that got me here. And then what I think I will do is leave this blank to represent the work that continues, the work that remains to be done. And so one of the things you can do while if you want to adorn this even more while your glue is still wet, you could add some glitter, sort of sprinkle some glitter over it. I'm going to let mine dry. I don't want that look to it. I want it to be kind of like rustic and just a focus on the stone. So I'm going to let the glue dry. And then what you can do is go in and sort of pick off the excess. That's what I love about E6000 is that's really easy to do. And then it'll look neat and tidy when you're ready. And so, when your frame is done, blow your breath across it and set the intention that the one who is honored here will see this frame, will appreciate it, will know that her memory is alive, and that the grounding and the psychic abilities that she brought and the reminder that she represented that who we are is always enough, that we don't have to be any more than we are today. My grandmother was very authentic. Which is rare. My grandmother was twice divorced at a time, you know, she was born in 1917. So that wasn't a really easy time to divorce twice. She had boyfriends, you know. She was a little bit of a hot tamale. And she kind of bucked tradition and social convention, and I just think that's really cool. You know what I mean? She kind of didn't care what people thought about her. She was walking her own path, and for women to do that at that time was kind of like power to the people, right? To go against the grain, especially, you know, in the United States at that time, it just wasn't a friendly place for women who were in and out of marriages and had small children. She had multiple miscarriages and a stillbirth of twins who died of spina bifida, and so she was just a strong lady. She had 2 children who survived, my mom and my aunt, and she lost her older daughter, my aunt, as you know, when she was 39. And so it was my mom who really looked out for her and took care of her until she passed away in 99. And I do a lot of what I do to carry her lineage forward. And thank you for being in the community, and which makes it possible for me to do the work that she left behind in a good way. So. I hope you've enjoyed this craft and story time, and I hope it inspires you to reflect on the beautiful stories from your family that ground you and anchor you and bring meaning to your life. I want to wish you a happy Halloween and a blessed Samhain. Then I'll see you soon. Aho to the ancestors. On we go.